before sensors, before computers, before emissions rules rewired everything. Trucks were built to be unkillable. No warning lights, no limp mode, just steel, torque, and engines that could run on bad fuel in the middle of nowhere. These 1970s trucks weren't designed to be polite to the planet. They were designed to win wars against terrain. Some are still working today with their original engines. And here's the wild part. Modern engineers can't legally build anything like them anymore. These are 10 trucks from the 1970s, born before emissions changed everything. Number 1. White Road Commander. The White Road Commander was never meant to be pretty. It was meant to work. Built by the White Motor Company, a brand rooted in heavy industrial machinery. This truck felt more like a moving piece of construction equipment than a consumer vehicle. In the 1970s, when many manufacturers were beginning to think about aerodynamics, comfort, and future regulations, White was still thinking in terms of steel thickness, frame strength, and raw durability. Everything about the Road Commander reflected that mindset. The cab was boxy and upright, built from thick metal panels that didn't flex or rattle like lighter designs. The doors closed with a heavy industrial thud, not a car-like click. Inside, the dashboard was functional, almost Spartan. Gauges were large and easy to read. Switches felt mechanical. Nothing existed just to look nice. It was all there to survive thousands of brutal miles. Under the hood, the Road Commander typically carried big Cummins, Caterpillar, or Detroit diesel engines. These were pre-electronic, fully mechanical power plants, built around simple principles: air, fuel, compression, and torque. No sensors, no engine computers. If something went wrong, a driver with basic tools and experience could often diagnose and fix it on the roadside. That independence mattered in an era when long-haul routes crossed empty deserts, mountains, and stretches of highway with no immediate help. Drivers who ran Road Commanders often described them as honest trucks. You felt everything: the vibration of the engine, the load shifting behind you, the resistance of the road. They weren't quiet, they weren't gentle, but they were predictable. Once you learned how a Road Commander behaved, it became an extension of your body. You could sense problems before they became failures. You didn't need warning lights. The truck spoke to you through sound and feel. The Road Commander's downfall had nothing to do with performance. It was a victim of timing. As emission standards tightened and the cost of engineering compliant engines and platforms skyrocketed, smaller and mid-sized manufacturers struggled. White went through mergers and reorganizations, eventually fading as an independent force in trucking. The industry shifted toward lighter, more aerodynamic designs, and the Road Commander's industrial DNA no longer fit the new direction. Today, surviving Road Commanders feel like relics from a harder, more mechanical world. They represent a philosophy that no longer exists in mass production. Build it heavy, build it simple, and expect it to outlive its owner. To modern drivers, they seem primitive. To old-school truckers, they remain symbols of a time when a truck didn't try to protect you from the machine, you learned to master it. Number 2. Diamond Rio Royale. Diamond Rio was one of America's oldest truck builders, tracing its roots back to the early 20th century. By the time the 1970s arrived, the company was small compared to giants like International or Ford, but it carried a reputation for building some of the toughest trucks on the road. The Royale was its final and most ambitious highway tractor, a machine that felt more like a fortress than a vehicle. Visually, the Royale stood out immediately. It was tall, squared off, and imposing. Where other trucks tried to soften lines or modernize shapes, the Royale embraced a blunt, industrial presence. It didn't look fast, it looked unstoppable. And that wasn't accidental. Diamond Rio built these trucks for environments where failure wasn't an option. Logging roads, oil fields, mountain passes, and remote routes where a breakdown could leave a driver stranded for hours or days. Mechanically, the Royale embodied pre-emissions philosophy. Massive diesel engines, often Cummins or Caterpillar, sat under long hoods, breathing freely and producing torque without restriction. These engines were not tuned for efficiency in the modern sense. They were tuned to pull, to climb, to keep moving under load, heat, dust, and stress. The drivetrains were heavy, the frames were thick, everything was built with margin. Drivers who ran Royales often described them as slow starters, but unstoppable runners. They weren't sprinters, they were marathon machines. Once a Royale settled into its rhythm, It would hold speed and direction with an almost stubborn determination. Hills that strained lighter trucks felt routine. Loads that scared other rigs became normal. Diamond Rio's collapse in the late 1970s wasn't a result of bad engineering. It was the economic reality of a changing industry. Emissions regulations demanded enormous investment. Fuel crises reshaped buyer priorities. Fleets began to favor standardized, mass-produced platforms with corporate backing. A small manufacturer, no matter how tough its trucks were, couldn't compete in that environment. The Royale didn't fail. The world simply outgrew the conditions that allowed such a truck to exist. Every surviving Royale today is a mechanical time capsule, a reminder of an era when a truck could be designed purely around strength with no concern for computers, compliance strategies, or corporate efficiency models. It stands as proof that toughness alone once mattered. Number 3. Brockway, 361 and 776. Brockway trucks were built in Cortland, New York, and carried a reputation that bordered on legendary among drivers who knew them. Brockway didn't chase trends. It didn't soften designs. It built machines that looked industrial because they were industrial. The 361 and 776 highway tractors were expressions of that philosophy. Long-nose, heavy-frame rigs designed for real work, not showroom appeal. These trucks had a presence that felt almost military. Flat panels, tall grills, square cabs. Nothing about them suggested comfort or style. Everything suggested strength. Brockway frames were famously thick. Their suspensions were designed to carry serious weight over bad roads. Under the hood, buyers could choose big Caterpillar, Cummins, or Detroit engines, fully mechanical, brutally simple, and capable of running for decades with proper care. What made Brockway special wasn't just how tough the trucks were. It was the culture around them. Drivers who ran Brockways became fiercely loyal. Many refused to switch brands even as the company struggled financially. To them, a Brockway wasn't just a tool, it was a partner. It didn't coddle you, it demanded respect. But it gave that respect back in reliability. In the 1970s, as emissions regulations tightened and development costs rose, Brockway faced an impossible future. Competing with multinational manufacturers required capital that a small regional builder simply didn't have. In 1977, Brockway closed its doors. Not because its trucks were inferior, but because the industry no longer had room for small, independent builders of heavy mechanical machines. That closure turned Brockway into legend. Today, spotting a Brockway on the road feels unreal. They are rare, preserved by collectors and old-school drivers who refuse to let the name die. Each one represents a path trucking could have continued on. A world where regional manufacturers built brutally tough machines for specific needs rather than standardized platforms governed by regulation and software. Brockway didn't disappear because it failed. It disappeared because the industry changed what success meant. Number 4. Autocar DC and AT series. Autocar approached truck building like an engineering firm, not a marketing brand. The DC and AT series of the 1970s reflected that mindset. These trucks were designed from the ground up as working machines, tools for heavy transport, not lifestyle vehicles. Autocars were known for their frames, thick, straight, overbuilt. Where some manufacturers balanced strength with weight savings, Autocar leaned unapologetically toward durability. These trucks were common in tanker fleets, dump conversions, heavy regional hauling, and specialized vocational work. They thrived in environments where a truck wasn't just pulling freight, it was part of an industrial process. Inside, Autocar cabs felt purposeful. The layout made sense. Controls were placed where a working driver needed them. Visibility was good. Everything felt designed by someone who understood how trucks were actually used. There was no attempt to soften the experience. Noise, vibration, and mechanical presence were part of the job. Under the hood lived the heart of pre-emissions trucking, big mechanical diesels, engines that responded directly to throttle input. No delay, no interpretation. When you pressed the pedal, fuel flowed. The engine answered. Drivers learned to manage power with precision, feeling every change in load and grade through sound and vibration. As emission standards advanced, Autocar made a strategic decision. Instead of fully re-engineering traditional highway tractors for the new era, the company shifted focus towards specialized vocational vehicles. The era of classic autocar semis ended. The DC and AT trucks became artifacts of a time when a highway tractor could be designed with one goal: work as hard as possible with the fewest complications. Today, old autocar semis are revered among those who know them. They represent a purer form of truck design, one that trusted the driver, respected mechanical simplicity, and prioritized longevity over everything else. In an age of screens and sensors, they remind us that a truck once needed nothing more than steel, diesel, and a skilled hand on the wheel. Number 5. International Transstar II. The International Transstar II marked a turning point in how American highway trucks looked and functioned. While long-hood conventionals still ruled much of the road, the Transstar II embraced a cab-over engine design that felt modern, efficient, and purposeful. It was built for tight docks, urban freight, and regional hauling where maneuverability mattered as much as raw power. Yet beneath that forward-thinking layout, it remained a true product of the pre-emissions era, mechanical, muscular, and direct. What set the Transstar II apart was balance. It wasn't as brutally industrial as a Brockway or as fortress-like as a Diamond Rio, but it wasn't soft either. It combined International Harvester's agricultural and industrial heritage with a more refined, road-focused design. The cab sat high, giving drivers commanding visibility. The steering felt lighter than many long-hood rigs, and the shorter wheelbase made it easier to work in crowded terminals and city streets. Under the cab lived the heart of 1970s trucking. Fully mechanical diesel engines. Cummins and Detroit power plants dominated, tuned for torque and longevity rather than emissions compliance. These engines responded instantly to throttle input. Drivers learned to modulate power by ear and feel. There were no computers smoothing mistakes. Skill mattered. The Transstar II became a favorite in fleets that ran hard but needed efficiency. LTL carriers, regional freight companies, port haulers. It could run all day, dock after dock, without the physical fatigue that came with some heavier, harsher trucks. Yet it still carried the toughness expected of a 1970s rig. Frames were strong, drivetrains were simple, repairs were straightforward. As regulations tightened in the late 1970s, and International began redesigning everything, the Transstar name lived on, but the spirit changed. Electronics crept in. Emissions hardware reshaped engine bays. The mechanical purity that defined the original Transstar II faded. Today, the 1970s Transstar II represents a brief moment when modern didn't mean complicated. It was advanced in layout, not in software. It respected the driver's skill rather than replacing it. In that sense, it stands as one of the clearest bridges between the old world of pure steel and the new world of regulated computerized trucking. Number 6. GMC Astro 95. The GMC Astro 95 looked like the future dropped onto a 1970s highway. Flat-faced, tall, and unmistakable, it broke away from the endless parade of long noses and announced itself as something different. To some drivers it was awkward, to others revolutionary. Either way, it had personality, and that alone set it apart. The Astro 95 was GMC's answer to efficiency and maneuverability. With the cab sitting over the engine, overall length was reduced while trailer space increased. It was ideal for ports, cities, and regional freight where turning radius and dock access mattered. But unlike later cabovers, the Astro was still a product of the mechanical age. Under the cab sat Detroit diesel-power two-stroke engines that screamed, vibrated, and pulled with a character no modern motor can replicate. These engines weren't quiet. They weren't polite. They announced every combustion event. Drivers didn't just operate them, they listened to them. You learned shift points by sound. You knew load by vibration. The Astro's cab was a mixed experience. Visibility was excellent. You sat high, with the road stretching out below you. But heat from the engine, noise, and ride harshness reminded you constantly that you were sitting atop a working machine. There was no illusion of separation. You and the truck were one unit. Some drivers loved that intimacy. Others hated it, but nobody forgot it. As American highways expanded and regulations changed, cabover designs lost favor. Longer trailers, relaxed length laws, and rising safety standards pushed fleets back toward conventionals. Emissions-era redesigns made compact, serviceable cabovers harder to justify. The Astro faded from production. Today, the GMC Astro 95 feels like a relic from an alternate future, a path trucking briefly explored and then abandoned. It represents a time when innovation meant changing form, not adding software. When a modern truck could still be loud, mechanical, and raw. In a world of quiet, aerodynamic fleet rigs, the Astro stands as a reminder that the future once looked bold, noisy, and unapologetically industrial. Number 7. The Ford CL9000. The Ford CL9000 was not subtle. It was enormous, imposing, and unapologetically industrial. A reminder that Ford once played in the same brutal arena as the biggest names in heavy trucking. In the 1970s, this truck represented Ford's vision of a true highway brute, built for extreme loads and unforgiving conditions. Everything about the CL9000 communicated mass. The hood stretched long and wide. The grille stood tall and square. The frame rails underneath were thick enough to look like bridge components. This wasn't a truck meant to look sleek or refined. It was built to haul weight day after day in industries where failure meant lost money, stranded crews, and sometimes danger. The CL9000 found its home in logging operations, oil fields, heavy equipment transport, and long-haul work, where torque mattered more than speed. Under the hood lived big displacement diesel engines from Caterpillar and Cummins, fully mechanical, brutally simple, and tuned for pulling power. These engines didn't whisper. They rumbled, roared, and shook the cab with every load. Drivers didn't rely on gauges alone. They relied on sound, vibration, and instinct. What set the CL9000 apart was how honest it felt. There was no illusion of comfort. The cab was functional, the ride stiff, the steering heavy, but that weight gave the truck authority. On the highway, it felt planted. On grades, it dug in. You didn't ask a CL9000 if it could handle a load, you assumed it could. Ford's presence in heavy trucking was always different from its car and light truck identity. These rigs weren't mass-market products. They were purpose-built machines for serious operators. But as the 1970s ended, the economics of heavy trucking shifted. Emissions compliance required massive investment. Competition tightened. Margins shrank. Over time, Ford exited the heavy-duty highway market entirely. The CL9000 stands as proof that Ford once built true big rigs machines every bit as tough as their competitors. It represents a version of the company that believed in raw mechanical strength over refinement. In today's world of aerodynamic fleet tractors and software-managed drivetrains, the CL9000 feels like a dinosaur. But it's the kind of dinosaur that ruled its environment. To the drivers who ran them, these trucks weren't relics. They were tools that did exactly what they promised. They pulled, they endured, they survived, and in doing so, they left behind a reputation that still commands respect. Number 8. White Freightliner WFT. Before Freightliner became a global powerhouse, there was a transitional chapter that many people forget, the white Freightliner era. The WFT trucks were born in a moment when the industry stood between two worlds, the heavy industrial past and the emerging future of efficiency, aerodynamics, and regulation. The WFT combined Freightliner's innovative thinking with White's reputation for toughness. These trucks carried the bones of industrial machinery, but began experimenting with lighter structures and more driver-focused layouts. They were not as brutal as a Road Commander, yet not as refined as later Freightliners. They existed in the narrow window when a truck could evolve without losing its mechanical soul. Under the hood, WFT trucks still relied on fully mechanical diesel engines. Cummins and Detroit power plants dominated, delivering the same raw, immediate response drivers expected from a 1970s rig. There were no computers to interpret throttle input. When you pressed the pedal, fuel flowed. When you backed off, the engine listened. That direct relationship between driver and machine remained intact. What made the WFT unique was its role as a bridge. You could feel the industry changing in its design. Cabs became slightly more ergonomic. Weight began to matter. Efficiency started to influence layout. But the truck was still built to be serviced with tools, not software. Breakdowns were mechanical problems, not diagnostic mysteries. As Freightliner separated and grew, the WFT identity vanished. New generations of trucks arrived, shaped by emissions standards, electronic controls, and corporate fleet requirements. The white Freightliner hybrids faded into obscurity, often misidentified or forgotten entirely. Today, a surviving WFT feels like a snapshot of transition. It's a truck from the moment before everything became complicated. It still behaves like a 1970s rig, loud, mechanical, demanding. But it hints at the future, lighter construction, evolving cab design, and a shift in philosophy. In that sense, the WFT is one of the most historically important trucks of the era. It marks the exact point where the old world and the new world touched, and then, almost immediately, parted ways. Number 9. Oshkosh, severe-duty highway tractors. Oshkosh built its reputation on military trucks, fire apparatus, and extreme-duty machines that operated where roads barely existed. In the 1970s, when Oshkosh applied that mindset to highway tractors, the result was something far outside the mainstream trucking world. These were not ordinary semis. They were engineered like armored vehicles that just happened to run on public roads. Oshkosh highway tractors were designed for industries that lived on the edge: oil exploration, pipeline construction, mining, and remote heavy haul. Where other trucks avoided mud, snow, broken terrain, and brutal weather, Oshkosh trucks were sent into it. Their frames were massive. Their suspension systems were built for punishment. Components were oversized to the point of looking absurd next to conventional rigs. Under the hood lived the same pre-emissions mechanical diesels of the era, Cummins, Detroit, and Caterpillar, but paired with drivetrains designed to survive shock loads and continuous abuse. These trucks weren't optimized for fuel economy or ride comfort. They were optimized for survival. Drivers who ran Oshkosh highway tractors often described them as indestructible. They weren't fast, they weren't refined, but they went where nothing else could. Frozen oil fields, desert work zones, temporary haul roads carved through wilderness. In those environments, efficiency meant nothing. Reliability meant everything. In the pre-emissions era, building a machine like this was possible. Engineers didn't have to design around sensors, particulate filters, or electronic controls. If a truck needed more steel, it got more steel. If it needed more torque, it got a bigger engine. The goal was capability, not compliance. As regulations tightened and the industry moved toward standardization, machines like these lost their place. Fleets wanted predictable operating costs and nationwide service networks. Specialized monsters became liabilities. Emissions compliance made low-volume platforms prohibitively expensive. Oshkosh shifted focus back to its core markets, military and emergency vehicles, where extreme-duty engineering still made sense. Its highway tractors faded into obscurity. Today, encountering an Oshkosh highway rig feels like discovering a creature from a different ecosystem. It doesn't look like it belongs among aerodynamic fleet tractors. It looks like it belongs on a battlefield or in a disaster zone. And that's exactly the point. These trucks prove that 1970s trucking wasn't just about highways. It was about conquering terrain. They represent the outer edge of what pre-emissions engineering allowed. Machines built with no compromise because the world they served demanded none. Number 10. Magirus-Deutz America. Among all the forgotten trucks of the 1970s, few were as strange or as fascinating as the Magirus-Deutz highway tractors sold in America. Built by a German manufacturer best known for fire engines and industrial vehicles, these rigs brought something almost unheard of to U.S. highways: large, air-cooled diesel engines. In a world dominated by water-cooled Cummins, Detroit, and Caterpillar motors, Magirus-Deutz stood apart. No radiators, no coolant hoses, no risk of freezing in winter or boiling in summer. Instead, massive finned cylinders and powerful cooling fans kept the engine alive. The result was a truck that felt alien. The sound was different. The vibration was different. The maintenance philosophy was different. Drivers who encountered them often didn't know what to think. Some loved the simplicity. Others distrusted what they didn't understand. But these trucks embodied the pre-emission spirit perfectly. They were mechanical in the purest sense. No electronics, no emission control strategies, just air, fuel, compression, and motion. In extreme climates, deserts, cold regions, remote work sites, the absence of coolant systems was an advantage. There was nothing to freeze, leak, or boil. Magirus-Deutz trucks never became common in America. Parts availability, unfamiliar technology, and a market dominated by domestic brands limited their reach. As emissions rules tightened, the cost of adapting air-cooled diesels to meet regulations became impractical. The experiment ended, yet their existence matters. They represent a time when the industry was still open to radically different ideas, when a foreign manufacturer could introduce a fundamentally different engine philosophy and put it on American highways, when compliance didn't immediately dictate design. Today, a Magirus-Deutz tractor feels like a visitor from another timeline, a reminder that trucking once had multiple possible futures: air-cooled engines, extreme-duty platforms, regional builders, industrial overkill. The world chose another path. Regulation, efficiency, electronics, standardization. These trucks, everyone in this article, are echoes of paths not taken. They remind us that the 1970s were not just the end of something. They were the moment when trucking could have become many different things. Instead, it became one. And that is why these forgotten giants still matter. These trucks weren't efficient. They weren't quiet. They weren't clean. But they were honest. They started every morning, pulled anything you hooked to them, and asked for nothing but fuel and respect. Today's trucks are smarter, but these were tougher. They represent a time when built for life wasn't marketing, it was the goal. So tell me in the comments, which of these beasts would you still drive today? And if you love raw machines from the age before limits, hit subscribe, because legends like these deserve to keep roaring.